Think about the last drink you had, a beer, a glass of wine, maybe just one at a party. You probably didn't think twice about it. It's just something people do. But here's something wild. The urge inside you, the pull that makes alcohol taste good, that started long before there were any humans at all. It started in monkeys, in the trees 10 million years ago. And the first time a human being made alcohol on purpose, it wasn't at a party. It was in a cave, next to a dead body. Here's the thing nobody tells you about alcohol. It is much, much older than people. Most people think alcohol started with wine or beer or some clever farmer a few thousand years ago. That is wrong. The real story starts inside monkeys, long before humans existed, and it ends up shaping some of the biggest changes in all of human history, including why we started farming in the first place. Once you hear the full timeline, you will never look at a simple drink the same way again. Here's what the evidence actually shows. Let's start with a strange question. Were human bodies actually built to handle alcohol? Most animals cannot handle alcohol well at all. If they drink even a small amount, their bodies react badly. But humans, ape and monkey relatives are different. Our bodies have a special tool for this called an enzyme, called ADH4, that breaks down alcohol fairly well. Here is the part that should surprise you. This enzyme did not appear when humans invented wine or beer or anything like that. It appeared around 10 million years ago. That is before modern humans existed. Before earlier human relatives existed, that is deep, deep in the past, back when our ancestors were still living in trees. A scientist named Robert Dudley spent years trying to figure out why our bodies developed this so early. His idea was called the drunken monkey hypothesis. Here is the idea in simple terms. Ancient monkeys ate a huge amount of fruit. Fruit was one of their main sources of food. When fruit becomes very ripe, tiny living things called yeast land on it. These yeast eat the sugar inside the fruit and create alcohol as a byproduct. This means truly ripe fruit naturally starts to smell a little bit like alcohol. That smell was not a warning sign to ancient monkeys, it was a signal. It meant this fruit is at its very best. Eat it now. Monkeys that ignored that smell missed out on some of the best, most energy-rich food around. Monkeys that were drawn to that smell found more food, survived better, and had more babies. Over millions of years, this small advantage kept getting passed down. Slowly, a liking for the smell and taste of alcohol became built into the brains of monkeys, apes, and eventually humans. This is not a weakness in us. It is millions of years of evolution working exactly the way it was supposed to. Scientists have actually tested this idea directly. In Panama, researchers studied wild spider monkeys and collected the fruit these monkeys chose to eat. That fruit naturally contained about 1 to 2% alcohol just from natural fermentation. When scientists tested the monkeys' waste, they found proof the alcohol was actually being processed inside their bodies, not just passing through. Another study, this time on chimpanzees in West Africa, found that their normal daily diet of fruit could give them the same amount of alcohol as 1 or 2 human drinks every single day without the chimps making any choice about it at all. It was simply part of eating normally. So our ancient ancestors were getting a small, mild buzz in the forest 10 million years ago without knowing it and without meaning to. Now here is where the story changes completely. At some point, an actual human being stopped just stumbling onto fermented fruit by accident. Someone decided to make alcohol on purpose. This is a much bigger leap than it sounds. It means noticing that something happened to grain after it got wet and sat for a while. It means remembering that. It means deciding to make it happen again on purpose. That is a form of thinking that looks a lot like early science. The oldest confirmed proof of humans making alcohol on purpose comes from a cave in Israel called Rakefet Cave. It was used as a burial place by a group called the Natufians, hunter-gatherers, who lived in that region between roughly 15,000 and 11,500 years ago. These were not simple, primitive people. They buried their dead with flowers. They kept dogs. This is some of the earliest known proof of dogs living closely with humans. Inside that burial cave, scientists found large stone bowls that still had residue in them after 13,000 years. When researchers studied that residue closely, the answer was clear. These people had made beer. Not wine, not some random fermented liquid. Beer made from wheat and barley through several careful steps. Wet the grain so it starts to sprout. mash it, and heat it. Then leave it to ferment using wild yeast floating in the air. That is a real multi-step process done on purpose 13,000 years ago. Here is the detail that should really surprise you. This was before farming existed anywhere on Earth. The Natufians did not grow crops. They gathered wild grain from the land around them, and instead of only eating it, they chose to use some of it to make beer, specifically to honor their dead. This has led to a genuinely big debate among scientists. Did humans first start farming because they wanted a steady supply of grain for bread, or because they wanted a steady supply of grain for beer? Some researchers think the desire for beer may have been one of the biggest reasons humans gave up moving around and settled down to farm in the first place. Think about it simply. Why would a group of people who were doing fine moving from place to place suddenly choose to settle down, break up the ground, plant seeds, and wait months for food to grow? A steady, reliable supply of beer is one very real answer that some scientists take seriously. Not everyone agrees. Many scientists still think bread came first and beer came along with it. But the discovery in that cave proves one thing clearly. People wanted to make alcohol before farming existed at all. Let me throw something at you that might sound wild. What if alcohol was never really about having fun? What if, from the very start, it was something closer to sacred? Here's the thing. The very first place we see humans making alcohol on purpose was a burial cave. Not a village, not a farm, a place for the dead. Some researchers argue that early alcohol was tied to something deep in how humans process big moments, like death, birth, and turning points in life. The slightly different feeling that alcohol creates may have felt to early humans like stepping just outside ordinary life for a moment. A doorway of sorts. I'm not saying every sip of beer today feels sacred, but the pattern in the very oldest evidence keeps pointing the same direction. Alcohol shows up again and again around death, prayer, and important community moments, long before it shows up as something people just had for fun on an ordinary evening. Different ancient cultures came up with alcohol on their own, often with no contact with each other at all. In China, at a village called Jiahu, scientists studied old pottery jars around 9,000 years old. Inside, they found a mixed fermented drink made from rice, honey, and fruit, a very early ancient cocktail. Around the same time, in the country now called Georgia, scientists found proof of winemaking about 8,000 years old. This is currently the oldest confirmed wine on Earth. People in Georgia still make wine the same traditional way today, in large clay pots buried in the ground. Also in China, at a site called Chateau, scientists found beer made from rice and a grain still grown in East Asia today. They also found the earliest known use of special mold to help break down grain before fermenting it, a method still used today to make several traditional East Asian drinks. None of these places were talking to each other. China, Georgia, and the Middle East each figured out fermentation completely on their own, around the same rough period in history. This tells us something important. Humans, given fruit or grain and enough time, will figure out fermentation again and again on their own, almost every time. Then came Mesopotamia, the region between two rivers in what is now Iraq. This is where writing was first invented, and some of the very first things people ever wrote down were records about beer. In Sumer, one of the earliest civilizations there, workers were paid part of their wages in beer. Builders, scribes, farmers all received regular amounts of beer as part of their normal pay, recorded carefully on clay tablets, the same way a business keeps records today. People even left beer offerings for those who had died, so they would have something for the journey ahead. The Sumerians loved beer so much they created a goddess just for it, named Ninkasi. A poem written in her honor around 3,800 years ago describes the steps of brewing in enough detail that a modern brewer actually recreated the recipe in 1989. People tasted it. It came out a little like fizzy wine mixed with dates. The Babylonians, who came after the Sumerians, documented around 70 different kinds of beer. Light beer, dark beer, beer mixed with honey, and more. One of the oldest written law codes in history, from around 1750 BC, even included rules about beer quality and punishment for anyone caught watering down their beer to cheat customers. In ancient Egypt, both beer and wine were central to daily life. The workers who built the pyramids were paid partly in beer and bread, and it made up a basic part of their diet. Since river water could carry disease, beer was often actually safer to drink than plain water. Wine, on the other hand, was for the wealthy and for religious ceremonies. Sealed wine jars found in royal tombs even had labels showing where the wine came from. Over 3,000 years ago, here's where it gets uncomfortable. For most of human history, alcohol was tightly tied to ritual, death, and community, used carefully and with meaning. But that connection did not always stay respectful or careful. Once alcohol became something that could be produced in huge amounts and sold widely, it also became something that could be misused, watered down, controlled, or taxed by whoever was in power. That very same Babylonian law about punishing watered-down beer is proof that people were already finding ways to cheat and profit off it thousands of years ago. The deeper truth is this: something that began as sacred, something tied to honoring the dead and marking life's biggest moments, has always sat right next to the possibility of greed and harm. That tension is not new. It goes back as far as the drink itself. So why does any of this matter now? Because the pull you feel toward alcohol today is not something modern culture invented. It is something sitting inside your body, shaped over 10 million years, long before any human chose to make a drink on purpose. The habit of using alcohol to mark important moments, birthdays, weddings, funerals, celebrations, has not gone away either. It has simply carried forward, almost unchanged in purpose, from a burial cave in Israel 13,000 years ago to any gathering happening tonight. And the idea of alcohol as something shared, something that builds community, still shows up everywhere today, at dinners, celebrations, and toasts. That instinct is ancient. It never really left us. So the next time someone hands you a drink, take a second to think about what you're actually holding. That glass connects in an unbroken line all the way back to a hunter-gatherer standing in a cave 13,000 years ago, tasting something strange and uncertain for the very first time and deciding it was good. And behind that person, stretching back even further, 10 million years of monkeys in the trees, following the smell of something sweet and choosing every single time to go toward it. We did not stumble into alcohol by accident. We grew toward it, slowly, the same way a plant grows toward light.